All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about something huge today, a really powerful idea. What if I told you that for almost 2,000 years, the core mission Jesus gave his church has been, well, fundamentally incomplete? So let's start by looking at what is arguably the biggest blind spot in a lot of modern Christianity. We're calling it the commission's missing half. I mean, think about this for a second. What if the very last command Jesus gave us, the one that's supposed to define everything we do, what if we've basically cut it in half for centuries? It's a huge thought, I know, but it's something we really need to dig into. Look, most of us know the first part of the mission inside and out, right? Preaching the good news, evangelizing, baptizing new believers. We build entire ministries around just that. But there's this whole other piece, a second half that Jesus really emphasized, that has somehow gotten lost along the way. So, where do we find this missing piece? Well, we've got to go straight to the source. Let's unpack that famous passage in Matthew, chapter 28. Here it is. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. Do you see the whole process there? It's go, make disciples, baptize, and teach them to obey. That last part is key. And this right here is the heart of the whole thing. Jesus didn't say, go make converts, people who just make a one-time decision and that's it. He said, go make disciples. And that difference, it's everything. Absolutely everything. So, what even is a disciple? A disciple isn't just a believer. They're more like an apprentice, a follower of Jesus who is actively being trained to think, to speak, and to respond just like Christ would. And how in the world does that happen? It happens by learning to obey his commands. When we miss this distinction, it creates this massive blind spot in the church. So let's talk about the real-world consequences. What's the problem with this? In so many of our churches, let's be honest, baptism is treated like graduation day. We dunk, we cheer, we celebrate, and then we kind of assume the main work is done. It's the big finale. But what if Jesus never saw it that way at all? What if, for him, baptism was never the finish line, but the starting line for the real race, the doorway into a lifetime of training and becoming more like him? And the result of getting this wrong? It's kind of devastating, honestly. We end up with churches that are packed, but the discipleship is shallow. You have folks who are genuinely saved, sure, but their lives don't really reflect it. They're still disobedient. We're churning out tons of converts, but so few overcomers. People who are actually conquering sin and walking in real power. Here's a way to think about it. If salvation is being born again, then discipleship is learning how to walk. So just imagine a baby who was born, but was never taught how to eat or speak or even stand up. That's the spiritual condition of millions of people today. They've been born, but they've never been trained. Okay, so the whole point here is that we have to restore the balance. This isn't about choosing one thing over the other. It's about seeing that there are two essential halves to this one single mission. The mission has two parts. Part 1, evangelism and baptism. That's the vital beginning. Part 2, teaching obedience. That's the crucial completion. If you don't have both, you end up giving birth to believers who never grow into the warriors they were created to be. Because without that second half, without the actual training in obedience, Christianity just becomes information without transformation. Our heads get full of knowledge, but our hearts and our lives, they stay exactly the same. All right, so what does this return to obedience actually look like? In the real world, what does discipleship mean? Let's get super clear on this. First off, discipleship is not a 6-week church program you can graduate from. It's a lifestyle. And it's not fast. It's about being faithful. It's that slow, steady, day in, day out process of walking with people until they start to look more and more like Jesus. And this is where the rubber meets the road. It gets gritty. This is the real hands-on work. We're talking about teaching someone how to actually forgive when every part of them wants to hold a grudge, or showing them how to deal with their own pride the moment it flares up. It's about training them to hear God's voice for themselves, and maybe most importantly, how to obey the word, not just be really good at quoting it. But when we start to embrace this, man, the vision for the future gets incredibly exciting. This is all about finishing the very work that Jesus himself started. Because here's the truth. Nations are not transformed by great sermons or huge conferences alone. They're transformed one life at a time through people who have actually been discipled, people whose daily obedience literally changes their homes, their workplaces, and their whole communities. So let me just ask you, straight up, do you want to change the world? Do you want to be part of that real, lasting revival we're all praying for? The answer isn't some big, complicated thing. It starts right here, right now. Just start by obeying what you already know God has told you to do. Obedience is where all that revelation becomes your reality. So here it is, the final takeaway. Evangelism is what starts the race. It gets us on the track. But it's discipleship, that training in obedience, that's what actually finishes it. In the end, it all comes back to these three simple, powerful words from Jesus himself. Let's not just preach a gospel that saves, let's start practicing a gospel that trains. Let's bring back the missing half of the Great Commission and actually finish what Jesus started. Teach them to obey.